I was a worker at a child care service, and there were different kinds of kids from all the walks of life just coming in through the system every day, and it wasn't something that everyone was very keen of seeing every day. There were kids from different backgrounds and different trauma mingling inside the system, and though it was not much to worry about the young kids, but the one above 10 who were much more hostile to the new environment, and they were put in, and the kids above the age were much more violent than anyone I have seen. Even though they shared the same trauma, it was difficult to get them to see eye to eye on things and the problems, and so they were often juggled from one institution to another, and were often in the system. And then they would end up 18 and struggling to keep the right ways in the society. My job was to make sure kids don't do that. So I struggled a lot, and then around a month later, I was transferred to the child division and the one with kids less than 10 years. And I thought that maybe it is time that things get easy for me. Working with teenagers was very tiring, and keeping them out of the system was very tough. But with kids, I assumed things would be easy. I was not sure of how to handle the kids so tender of age, but I knew all I had to do was be very kind and loving to them, and it was really a bliss to work with them. And for 2 years, I really got into it and did my very best to help the kids, and was able to really imprint an impact on their life and getting them places and with great families, and most importantly, loving families. I was in 2 years of working with the kids, and I had now complete control over management and handling of kids, and rarely a kid escaped the system as a danger. Everyone got out rehabilitated and safe. I remember the day. It is still very fresh in my memory. Mr. Roger, the doctor, called in a call of a kid that was found sitting around his murdered parents. He was an 8-year-old boy who had the injuries but was spared, and was found crying and sitting by the bodies of his parents. The boy was said to be in trauma and was not speaking to anyone. When the boy came into the institution, I looked at him, and I remembered him staring right back at me, and he was such staring and such coldness that I cannot even tell you about how he looked. I was in the horror of him staring into my soul, and when he walked past me, I remember there was a scene of chill that I felt. I am not the guy to make such snide comments, but there was something sinister about him. I was too guilty that I was judging him, but there was something that just did not sit right with me. I still to this day regret that I judged the kid too much, but I also in subconscious agreed with it all. The kid came in and was silent for hours, even after trying to find out more information about him. There was nothing he would say. He just drank the water he was given or eat the food he was given. He never asked for anything else other than that, and never said a word about anything. The counseling sessions were filled with silence, and the therapy sessions were filled with great silence, and the kid said nothing and asked for nothing in the coming weeks. But then when the new therapist stepped in, she was fair and just the right amount of heavy, and she had the sessions with the boy. And then it was then that the boy first cracked, and he started talking to her. She resembled a lot to him like his mother, and it was easier for him to open up. And then he told her the story, which she later told me. The boy said to her, "There is this voice that I feel I can hear, but I don't really hear it. And it compels me, and it tells me to do everything. To skin away the squirrels I feed, to kill Miss Parker's dog, and to even throw stones at the elderly couple in the neighborhood. I try to silence it, but it is more powerful than I could imagine. Can you please hold me close? I have never known what it feels like to be held closely to a woman's heart, and I think that touch can really make it go these voices silent." But she didn't. She knew it wasn't the right thing to do. I saw the file, and the boy was labeled sociopath, and when noticed, he did show and portrayed the qualities of one, and he was opening up to the new therapist I suggested, and he was telling about all the things that he had done, and how he wants everything to just stop. The therapist told me, he has not been loved as a child. His parents were probably negligent of the kid, and that has made him distant. He doesn't know the touch of the skin of another human, and I would want to try this method, hoping that he would finally open up about the feelings. She decided to take her approach, and in the next session, she got in the room with the boy and held him close and breastfed him, hoping that the skin touch was something that would make him open up. And as he held the woman tight and sucked her breasts, he took the piece of mirror he was hiding and consecutively stabbed her in her bare breasts, and continuously kept stabbing her and calling her out, and stabbed until she was lifeless. She never realized what came upon him. He reacted, but the not way she was thinking. And as he did, everything was being recorded in the cameras, and we were in shock trying to get to the room. And when we reached that, what we saw haunted us for the rest of our lives. The new therapist was top naked, and the boy was sucking the bloodied nipple and pressing the stabbed mirror through his hand, trying the best to cut himself slowly. It was the creepiest incident that have happened there, or probably the most sinister anywhere in the world to think that an 8-year-old boy would be capable of such weird, sinister acts.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
I can't say Andre was a particularly weird dude. I didn't know him well, but every time we did speak, he came across as completely normal. He was a pretty quiet guy, not very talkative, but then again, I've never been either. His personal interactions with others, at least the ones I witnessed, appeared totally above board. And as far as I'm aware, he did okay in classes and never had any more trouble with his teachers than anyone else. What I'm saying is nobody I hung out with had any concerns about his sanity. The events of the coming years, which should show how horrible and terrible judge of character I had, then maybe those close to him knew the true face behind the mask. As for me, when the facts of this case came out, I was shocked that it only got worse from there. As often happens, life moved on after high school as did die, and Andre became a small part of my childhood. That one morning, as I flipped through my newspaper, the face from my past was staring back at me, and when I read in the article adjoined, it meant my blood run cold. Since I'm not a professional writer, I thought I used the account the Texas Tribune's managing editor Brandy Grimson used in a feature she wrote for Texas Monthly. She states by 2004, Andre was 21 years old, deeply mentally ill, and receiving no treatment. On the bright, clear morning of March 27th, a change up the stairs to the third-floor apartment where Laura, his estranged wife, lived, and kicked in the door. Her boyfriend had already left for work. Andre was holding 3 knives, one of each of his intended victims. He first encountered Laura, who ran toward him screaming now. Andre plunged a knife into her chest. He then reached in and pulled out what he believed was her heart. He'd in fact extracted part of her lung. Next, he headed for the children's room, where Andre Jr. and 1-year-old Leah were sleeping. Andre held down his 4-year-old son and stabbed him before moving on to Leah. He carved out each of the children's hearts. Finally, Andre jammed a knife into his own chest 3 times and laid down beside Laura on the living room floor, expecting to die. Confounded when he did it, he slipped the organs he had removed into his pocket and walked more than 5 miles home. A few hours later, he went to the Sherman Police Department where he confessed to the murders and asked if he would be forgiven. I thought it was what God wanted me to do. He later told investigators after undergoing emergency surgery to repair his life-threatening stab wounds. Andre was moved to the Grayson County Jail, where his behavior became more and more psychotic. He gestured wildly and announced that he was going to save the world. He claimed to be the 13th warrior of the dollar bill and said that Laura and the children weren't dead, but that their hearts had been freed from evil. Horrified doesn't begin to describe my feelings upon reading this. He had always been hiding the monster inside him, or as often happens, had the specter of schizophrenia gradually take hold of him as he entered into his early 20s. It's an answer I doubt I'll ever get. Almost everything written on the case focuses on the monstrosity of the crimes rather than its causes. As shocking as this all was, the case was destined to only become more bizarre. I figured once the trial eventually came around, Andre would eventually be found guilty and given multiple life sentences or the death penalty. No matter the result, he would do just as he had before and slipped to the back of my mind, perhaps only to be thought of on very rare occasions. It appears, however, he wasn't quite ready to be forgotten. Just 6 days after taking the lives of his family, my old school acquaintance gouged out his right eye. It was claimed he did so because of a Bible passage he'd read. Even after all this odd behavior, he was deemed fit to stand trial for capital murder. Just as I'd imagined when the time came, he was found guilty for all 3 murders and sentenced to death. The people for Texas had spoken, and the time had come for Andre to move off to his new home on death row. As before, I foolishly believed his and my stories had diverged for the last time, and nothing more could happen. Andre had one more card up his sleeve to play, however, and one more I left to black out. Once again, the story said he blinded himself because of the very same Bible verse. However, this time, he upped the ante on 2 counts. Rather than stabbing out the offending eye, he yanked it out from the socket. The second part was far more gruesome. When the guard had discovered him in his cell covered in blood at the location of said owl, the answer was simple. He didn't it. Despite what he'd printed in all of the sensationalist newspaper articles, the true reason for blinding himself seems to be an attempt to force the state of Texas to give him the psychiatric care he'd been asking for since his arrest. The appears he'd gotten as wish, but as it stands now, his death sentence remains standing. The way things are currently, Andre is being held in a state psychiatric facility, awaiting his day with the executioner. That's the extent of any information I've been able to come across. As recently as 2013, a Texas Court of Criminal Appeal judge found the defendant clearly crazy, but also sane under Texas law. While I'm not here to discuss the finer points of whether the death penalty is a good or bad thing, that's a far deeper length, and I'm prepared to wait until I think we could all agree the man has some problems. I've included only the most important facts in my retelling, but you will have no problem finding more through a simple internet search if you're so inclined. However, I do warn you, the remaining details are not for the faint of heart. For some readers, the outright gruesome nature may prove to be too much. You've been warned. I remember the craze for the new Avatar film. We were all packed and ready to leave for the special screening that the studios have done. I was a film critic, so mostly it was us that got to review it all first, and to be able to review the most anticipated film of the decade was quite an honor, and we were not going to miss that for anything. And we did go to the premiere, and to make sure we looked presentable, we wore our finest suits to it. It was the Chinese theater, and we were all introduced to the director, and before the film could start, they were getting stuff for us at our seats. It was the regular popcorn bucket and drinks and raisins, and I did catch a glimpse of the director, and he was standing right at the corner of the big screen, and he looked pretty wrecked, as if there was something going behind the scenes that we didn't know. This movie was everything that everyone was talking about, and we were being taken care of like we weren't just ordinary film critics. They wanted us to really like the movie, and they were making sure that we would get the full experience. They didn't want us to give any bad reviews, I guess, but there was no way that I would not write an honest review. I knew that I would write only the truth about the movie. The screening was already around half an hour late, and we were getting all impatient and tired sitting on the seats. I remember some of the guys were even leaving the theater, and the director was trying to get them all seated, but no one was really into it. The show started around 40 minutes late, and the seats were already empty, and by the time the film started, half the hall was empty, and I was still sitting there, and probably I was the only one who had the most following, so I was the one that did not really want to let go off, and I could see throughout the film that the director was staring at me at the intervals, trying to judge my reaction, to see if I am liking the film or not, and I was making sure to give him the fake looks. I did not want him to understand what is actually going on with me. There were moments that I was enjoying, and there were moments that I wasn't really into. And the fact that the film started so late, I was already tired sitting on those seats. And I remember all I wanted to do was sleep, but the director had his eyes on me, so I couldn't shut my eyes for mere seconds. I remember I was really fighting my urge to just sleep, and midway into the film, I wanted to lie down and take a real good nap. The film, as grandiose as it was, bored me, and before the screen could clear for an intermission, I remember falling asleep on my chair as it got harder to let my eyes stay open. And then I didn't imagine, and I fell asleep on the seat. I could hear the film going for a while, and everything was blurred, and I was almost asleep when everything went dark, and I guess I completely slept. I think I might have slept for the whole time because when I opened up my eyes, it was completely dark, and I thought that I have messed up and stayed asleep since the screen was black and there was no one there, and it felt like I was in trouble, and I was in no way entitled to review it completely. But then I saw it was the director. He came closer, and he looked at me for minutes. He just stared at me, and he kept staring at me. And then a few minutes later, he said, "How was the film?" He looked at me, and I tried to answer, and he did again. "Did you like the film?" And then I said, "Yeah, sure, I liked it." And then he asked around for a while, and then he said, "What was the last thing that happened in the film that you watched?" And I was just looking here and there, trying to figure out answers, and I realized that I didn't have any answer for it. And then later he came closer. "You're lying, aren't you? You didn't watch the movie." And I said, "I did, I watched it." And then he looked at me with stern look and said, "Okay then, review it. Review the movie right here." And I was so pissed, and at the same time, I was a bit scared about his obsession and asked, "Come on, please review it for me." And I decided, well, there was nothing he could really do. He might be crazy, but at the end, he is just a celebrity. So I started. The movie starts out well, and there are moments that piques your interest, and you want to see where the movie is going. You try to see the film and understand, but you don't. You go to the cinema for experience, and that is all you get. You witness something made really beautifully, but there is no character that you can hold on to. There's no emotion to the story, and it felt like I am watching a National Geographic film. But then that is it. An experience, and there is that emptiness that makes it incomplete. While it is brilliant, it is also a terrible film. That explains why I don't remember the moment I slept and missed the rest of it, because after consuming the awe and beauty of it, you will get bored and probably sleep. And then I stopped. I realized I've been too honest with him, and then I looked up and he was furious. And then, when I looked up, an I saw was pointing a gun at me and said, "Are you going to publish that? Your answer will be responsible for your next decision." And then I realized the situation I was in, and I decided to say that I will not publish. And then he gave me the script and said that this is what I have to run, and I did that. I wasn't going to mess around with that big of the industry professional. And that was when I had to give the false review of Avatar, a movie I never liked.